I am Pat Watts, President and CEO of FCI Management and Vice Chair at the California African American Chamber of Commerce. So we are thrilled. This program is going really good today. We have just heard all of these amazing speakers, and guess what? Not finished yet. So now we're going to be hearing from two amazing African American economists. They're going to talk to us a little bit today about the state of the African American economy. A lot of excitement going on over there. I don't want to rush anybody. Okay, then we're going to be talking 2 minutes of all right, so I am told that lunch will be in this room and that we will take a break after Dr. Malveaux speaks. And so we're just doing a little adjustment here. How's everybody doing out there? Are you enjoying yourself? This is like one of the best economic summits you've ever been to. Thank you, Kim. So we're really happy that you're here and that you are participating and that you're hearing about all of these opportunities. And I'm really speaking to the chamber people today because chambers are where small businesses go to gather, to get information, to get resources, to help grow their businesses. And so a lot of this information, I can do that too. A lot of this information, as we heard earlier from Tokes, how he was disappointed that so many people weren't aware of the opportunities and programs that are available, which means that we, as chambers, have to do a better job at getting information out to our members. And we also, as chambers, especially black chambers, you guys talking again? Thank you. I know I have a loud voice, but it's sometimes hard to talk over all the other voices. So as chambers, we really have a responsibility to collaborate, to come together. These were African American chambers that represent members in small communities. We have 2 or 4 chambers right here in Southern California. We have chambers up and down the Central Valley. We have chambers in Northern California. But we need to be collaborating. We need to be talking. We need to be coming together with one voice. And what is the purpose of that? The purpose of that is to grow African American businesses who help to grow in wealth development in our communities. We tend to hire, from those communities, and that's really important. And I can tell you that as an entrepreneur myself, that part of my drive when I started my business was to create jobs for African Americans in the energy industry. So with that, I think my 2 minutes of talking is up, and I would like to introduce to you our next guest. So we are so really blessed and lucky to have with us today Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who also spoke to us last year during our economic summit. She came from a long way to be here, so I want you guys to listen to her very carefully. Dr. Malveaux is a left-of-center labor economist, professor, author, Dean of College of Ethnic Studies at Cal State University, LA, and the president and founder of Left Center Economic Education Institute. She supports the far left Black Lives Matter movement. Did you guys hear what I said? I don't know why we have to be the far left. Why can't we just be the center Black Lives Matter movement? I just have to say that. Okay. And she is an outspoken proponent of reparations for the descendants of slaves in the United States. She's also said that when she listens to the Star-Spangled Banner, she hears, "Land of the thief, home of the slave," instead of the line, "Land of the free and home of the brave." Her political idols are Representative Maxine Waters, Democrat California, Southern California, Sheila Lee from Texas, Barbara Lee from Northern California, and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. So it is my privilege to welcome to the stage today Dr. Julianne Malveaux.
Well, good afternoon, y'all. Good afternoon. Louder, louder. Please. Thank you. You got to keep my energy. I got up at 2 this morning, which would be 11 your time. Be on a 5 o'clock plane to Dallas, and then from Dallas to here. And the Dallas plane sat on the runway forever. So forgive my tardiness, but I wasn't flying the plane. Now, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be with you for any number of reasons, but especially because Black chambers are so very important. And they're very important in an era where people don't want to talk about race. Just a few minutes ago, I learned that Orange Man and his team are trying to dismiss. I try not to curse much, and using that name is like cursing. So, you know, you might hear me drop a Maryland farmer or two, but I'm not during the speech, I'm just saying. But I don't plan to call the name of the devil while I'm talking to angels. But just today they want to throw out his charges because Fonnie Willis raised the issue of race. And they said by raising the issue of race, she had broken her lawyer's oath, whatever it is, and so that would give them a reason to take the case out. That's nonsense. But people don't want to talk about race anymore, and yet we must. We know what's going on. We know what the disparities are. But what I want to begin with, we'll be joined later by Dr. Anthony Samad, and he's going to talk a bit more. I'm going to talk about the national picture and drill into California. He's going to talk about California and drill into LA. But the national picture is important in terms of the U.S. business climate because of the context that you're working in. What we learned today, actually the data was released this morning. I was on a plane. They kept telling me to get off my computer. I'm like, nah. I finally did because I didn't want to get thrown off the plane. Made enough headlines doing that kind of thing. But growth for 2023 was 3.1%. It exceeded all expectations. It's very good. We're very pleased. What I can't get my head around is why nobody gets that growth is good. Right. Unemployment rate nationally is 3.7, 3.8. Of course, where California is higher. And that's a challenge. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in California that makes us different and frankly more challenged than the national climate. We have more business startups, and minority business has grown, well, Black business has grown, and there's something we also need to do. We can say Black. It's okay to say Black. You don't have to say minority. You can say Black, because there are very different trajectories here, and we need to know that. In this state, as an example, when we talk about minority business, there are over 900,000 Latino-owned businesses, but fewer than 200,000 Black-owned businesses. Less than 7,000 Native-owned businesses, and about 700,000, and I'm rounding in my head, Asian American-owned businesses. Is that important that we have these disparities? At some level, yes it is, but we need to acknowledge them. Because everybody brown ain't down. And the genesis of access is different for different folks. And it doesn't mean that we can't have alliances or that we can't celebrate our allies, but the ways that we got to where we got are different based on race and ethnicity, and we just have to say that. But anyway, going back to where we are, inflation is down. You know, in June of 22, inflation was at 9%. Now it's at 3.4%. That's amazing. But again, unfortunately, when you talk to people, they're not happy about this economy, as if they think they would get something better to somebody else. But they're not happy about the economy. I call a show macroeconomic ecstasy and microeconomic angst. In other words, when you look at the numbers look great. But when you ask Susie Q, who just paid an extra $1 a dozen for eggs, she's mad. Like, this is too expensive. You know, what happened? And inflation is real, but it is down. But right now, I would say, with some caveats, that all wheels are moving in the same direction for once. We don't see this often in the economy. So consumer spending is way up. People say, well, inflation, but people are spending money. Now they're slowing down, but they spend a record amount of money during the holidays. We haven't seen anything like that. They're slowing down, but they're not slowing down a lot. Consumers, businesses, government, some of that Biden recovery money, and I'll go into that in a minute, is still out there. And so businesses are doing well. Housing is doing better. It's not doing well. And one of the things that we note is that rents are extremely high. In some cities like Los Angeles, they're much higher than they were, you know, just a year ago. And so the housing market is still weird. Trade is doing well. Inventory, we don't have the supply chain problems that we had a year ago. So inventory is doing well. If you try to go buy a car, you have a better deal than you would have gotten a year ago. And so the economy is doing okay. But there are caveats. What are some of the caveats? Every month, there's some economists who say we're going into a recession. You keep hearing about a recession. It's almost like it's predictive. We're going to have a recession. We're going to have a recession. It's almost like beating a drum. Let's have a recession. And it's not all economists, and there's always differences. I went to a thing with a bunch of my MIT classmates, and it was quite interesting at the just range of what people thought. And it wasn't, you know, many of us are conservative, many of us are extremely liberal, or in my case, I just say revolutionary.
Yeah.
But then when you look at the range, you could not correlate the opinion with where people were coming from. People were looking instead at what they thought was going to happen. Why is there such angst? Number one, there are inflationary expectations. The Fed continues to play with the interest rate. What they're trying to do is to get us back to about a 2% inflation rate. That's what's considered desirable. So they keep playing with, you know, we're going to take the rate up, we're going to take the rate down, and people are very confused by that. That's number one. Number two, so it's the expectations, it's the Fed, it's a question of whether we're going to have a hard stop or a soft landing. And I would say right now that we'll have a soft landing. We're not going to have a hard stop, in my opinion. But the second reason why there is uncertainty is because there are a couple things going on that we all know about, we're absorbed in, and we're kind of maybe a little mad about it. The coming election. This is a part of our economic expectations. Who will win the White House? And what does it mean when who wins the White House? And I just saw something where 60% of all Americans say they don't want to see a rematch between the Orange Man and Biden. Everybody says Biden's too old, but what Reverend Jackson once said, I'd rather see, what did he say? I'd rather see Roosevelt in a wheelchair than Reagan on a horse. And, in other words, disability or age does not prevent you from doing a good job.
Right.
And so Biden, whatever he is, 80-something, 81, 82, no, I think he's 80. But whatever he is, he looks feeble. I'm sorry that he looks feeble, but that doesn't mean he is feeble. I mean, frankly, I took a fall. I've got all this craziness going on. I look feeble. I was walking off the stage the other day, and this little brother came and he said, "Let me take your arm before you fall." And I said, "Praise the Lord." And he was cute too. But any of us can look feeble at any point in time. It doesn't mean that we're not thinking. It just means that we look that way. But people are very concerned about both the White House and the Congress. And then let's not forget, right this minute, we have a hard stop on the budget of March 2nd or 3rd. And we keep pushing it back, pushing it back, pushing it back. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is in a major disarray. They crack me up. You know, they're always talking about Democrats being chaotic. You know, what was it? Will Rogers said, "I don't belong to an organized party, I'm a Democrat." Well, what are they? But little Mike Johnson, he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's taking cues from the Orange Man. They have a very narrow majority. Republicans have a very narrow majority, but we see the hardball that the MAGA Republicans are playing. Nikki Haley, they said, if you give her money, we'll shut you down. That has nothing to do with the democratic process. The Orange Man is ticked. I mean, he is totally teed off that this woman cannot be intimidated. I mean, I couldn't vote for her. I couldn't vote for her. But I admire her spunk and her spirit. And she ain't backing down. But meanwhile, what that means for people who do business is that there's a lot of uncertainty. What it means is that there's not going to be anything we think might happen with business assisting legislation is not going to happen out of this Congress. They don't even want to talk about DEI, diversity, anything like that. But they certainly will not do anything about business assisting legislation. Still, there is money with my little list. There is money that from the Biden administration that's still out there. Thank you to President Biden. The number of black businesses doubled between 2019 and 2022. Now, that was after, of course, a decline because of COVID, but it doubled. We see enormous business growth. There's money from the American Rescue Plan. $10 billion went to access to capital programs that about 45% of that went to black business, about 45% of it. Inflation Reduction Act also was helpful. And then we have the bipartisan infrastructure law, which, this is interesting, which some of those people, Republicans, they oppose, but when the bridge got built in their state or in their city, they bragged on it. I brought the bridge. No, you didn't bring a bridge. You know, you voted against the bridge in Congress, but you're happy that the bridge is there because it's job generating. So the Biden administration has done a good job with us. There's also amount of money that he sent on an incubator and accelerator service. There are two programs in particular that target California. One is someplace called Lab Start, and another is Covered Communities. So there are opportunities within the legislation. I would urge everybody to look at that. If you have a business development officer or if you do it yourself, make sure that you get those applications in. One of the challenges we have, like business, often the application process is difficult and even turgid. And so guess what? We don't do it. Many black businesses did not get relief money from COVID because they couldn't fill out the applications. I looked at one and I'm like, this could be a lot for someone who's a solopreneur, if it's just you. And so I would encourage people also to start examining the pitfalls of solopreneurship. Are there others that you can merge with? Are there ways that you can basically bring some staff in? Are there things that you can do to take advantage of these programs? There is money out there, but we're not taking advantage of it. So in any case, I think that it's a reasonable kind of time for people to be doing business. The biggest uncertainty, of course, again, as I said, was the political climate that people are just so uncertain about. But the political climate is also something that you can be an actor in. Do you vote? I know I'm not talking to a group of a black chamber where people don't vote. I just don't vote. You know, I am so certain of it that I'm not even gonna say anything else. And if I'm lying, don't tell me. just go register and vote. I mean, you have the opportunity to shape some of these things. You have the opportunity to, one of the things that's interesting is that we have federal work, we have state work, I've talked about a little bit, and we have local work. How active are you in your chamber? How active are you in your city? How influential are you with your city council? Can you move things? If you can move things, you can influence the climate. Many of us get so overwhelmed with everything that's going on that we feel like we can't move things, but we can. Now, California is kind of a different story. We've seen job growth in California. although California does very well, if we were an economy all by ourselves, California, we were the 5th largest economy in the world. So we contribute about 17% of the national GDP. You gotta pay attention to California. But when California turns down, guess what? It affects the national economy as well. And I don't know what's going to happen here in California, but there are some major challenges. The challenges have to do with the deficit. A year ago, we were rolling in dough. What happened? So there's a deficit. Part of it is the flat tax revenue that's projected to go down. That's a big piece of the budget. We've had sluggish job growth. We have had job growth, but it's been sluggish. And our unemployment insurance fund has a deficit right now. We've had more people who've been unemployed than we projected. So when you work, they take out a little bit of your paycheck for unemployment insurance. And then when somebody's unemployed, that pot is used to pay their unemployment benefit. Well, right now we're underwater with that. We basically are paying more than we're collecting in that unemployment insurance fund. And if more people get unemployed, it's going to get worse. Where will we get the money from? We'll have to borrow it from the feds. With the current administration, not the administration, but the current Congress, because remember, the president can say anything he wants. The Congress is the fiduciary arm of government, that's why they've held up money for various international efforts, and I'm not going to talk about those because somebody starts shouting at me. Or not. But in any case, that's a big drag on the California economy. And not a lot of folk are talking about it, but you need to have that in context. So what we've seen in California in terms of job growth, a lot of it has been in the health sector. Well, the health sector, unless you're a physician, is notoriously low paid. If you're a home health aide, all of those ancillary jobs, notoriously low paid. So this does not really stimulate economic growth. The service sector is another sector where we've seen growth. And again, the service sector can tend to be low wage. And so that also is less than optimal. Now, when the places where we've always been excited has been a California thing, has been tech. But what we've seen in the past year in particular are major tech layoffs. In Twitter, now known as X, in PayPal, Lyft, Zoom, eBay, Google, Meta, Planet, and Amazon have all done layoffs. Some have been small layoffs in the hundreds, but some have been in the thousands and in the tens of thousands. And where do those people go? Some of these companies also, because they believe the cost of living is so high in California, have found alternate hubs in Arizona and Texas. And that means they're doing okay, but the people who used to work for them aren't. I know several young people who actually have relocated from the Bay Area, actually, to Austin, because that's where their jobs have gone. And they've said, I love San Francisco, but I need a job. So that's where they've gone. So this is, again, a drain on the California economy. And so what that means for entrepreneurs is you have to stay on top of the trends. You have to be really clear about what's going on. You have to be a lobbyist, either through your chamber or through others. We have 4 major areas, well, maybe 3. Well, LA, the Bay Area, Sacramento. You maybe want to think of the Silicon Valley as part of San Francisco or not, depending on who you're talking to. But those are the 4 major economic drivers in the state. So if you are in one of those areas, I would make it my business to be involved in policy around what you're doing. Now, the drawback with all of this, of course, is that we live in an era of anti-blackness. In this era of anti-blackness, nobody wants to talk about DEI. Nobody wants to talk about black business. People want to talk about people of color, or minorities. Well, that's not operational if a certain minority is always sidelined while other minorities are basically lifted up. And I'm not starting a fight. Never mind. I couldn't deal with the black brown rules. Okay. Become a black woman. But I couldn't deal with some of it. I had a faculty member tell me to my face, "Dean Malveaux, you're the problem. You know, we should have a black dean." Well, now you got an Asian one. By my recommendation. But you know, the tension between black and brown people is something as someone we got to get to the bottom of. It's there and it's real, and a lot of folks figure it's our turn, y'all had your turn. It's nonsense. You can never essentially remediate what happened during enslavement and its aftermath. I'm not just talking about enslavement. I'm talking about laws that were passed that prevented us from accumulating. I'm talking about the kind of redlining that undermined our property values. Talking about a whole set of federal laws, essentially, that made it impossible for us to accumulate. I'm talking about what I call economic lynchings, and I'm not going to talk a lot about that because I'm a wind up on that subject. It's what I'm doing some research on, trying to finish a book on. But what we have to know is that, again, I'll say it, everybody brown ain't down. Look at what your coalition looks like and who your allies are pushing for. Are they pushing for you? Do they say people of color when it's beneficial, or something else behind closed doors? And we know how closed doors work up to here. What was that one lady's name? Somebody?
Nori Martinez.
In any case, because of the situation that we're in, we have seen business growth, but it's easier to set up operations in expanding times than in contraction times. It's challenging to set up operations when you don't know what's going to happen. If you had a crystal ball, if you knew what the election was going to look like, well, gee, you'd be a gazillionaire. You don't have to go into business. You just sit with your crystal ball and tell people stuff. But basically, this is a precarious time, but it's not a zero time. By precarious, I mean people want to know. But it's not a zero time. In other words, if you have your stuff together, you can still do stuff. The businesses who will succeed that start now in this climate are people who are sufficiently capitalized, if not over-capitalized. The people who have done the research, people who have investors so they're not just relying on themselves, and people who have appropriate relationships with banks. The folks who want to have a business, B-I-D-N-E-S-S, not a business, need to stay home and go get them a J-O-B in the short run because it's not going to turn out right if you don't have the relationships and haven't done the work. But I think, and I'm going to take my seat and have Brother Samad come up here because I talked longer than I told him I was going to talk. But that's not unusual, is it, Samad? But in any case, as I take my seat, and he and I are going to have a conversation after he makes a presentation, which I'm really excited about because he's been looking at specific areas of LA. What I want to say is that there's never a perfect time to go into business. There's always a perfect time to advocate for business. Never a perfect time to go on a limb. Don't go on a limb without something up under the limb. And that's why you have to have the relationships and have done the homework. We can never give up on the idea that there is a special place for Black-owned business, and we must always maintain the integrity of Black-owned business. Wrong was done to Black folks, and that's why we need remediation. But guess what? Even without remediation, we survive and we thrive. Now, let me finally say it. Between 1880 and 1910, in 1880, Black people had $1 for every $36 white people had. By 1910, it was $1 for every $16 that white people had. Which means what? We closed the gap, we cut the wealth gap in half in 30 years. Today, depending on whose numbers you use, it's $1 for every $10 white people have, and it could be as maybe one for every $7 white people have. But let's go with the 7 number. We made less relative progress between 1910 and today than we made between 1880 and 1910. That's just something to consider. We think about what we can do. So don't let people tell you can't do business.
Thank you.
And you tell yourself that you're prepared to do business, that you're prepared. Preparation is the key. The national climate is fascinating, and I'm happy to answer some questions, but it's more than the national climate, it's also the national attitudes and we are in an era, absolutely, anti-blackness. I went to the gym the other day, I had this t-shirt that said, Black Votes Matter. I mean, I just go in my closet and pull out a t-shirt. And this white girl rolled up on me, and she needed to know better. I have a reputation in my gym, and people say stuff like, don't talk to her. This white boy once said very loud in 2016 that Hillary was his exact words, Hillary was a shit stain of the universe. So I got about half of the people in the gym calling him shit stain, because that's his nickname. Hey, shit stain, how you doing? So people should know better. I decided to say, the Black Votes Matter. The girl said, I said, why are you tapping me? Oh, I just want to let you know that white folks matter too. I said, and I will kick your I said, and don't get on my rowing machine again. This is Dr. Anthony Samad. He is the director of the Nightly Center at Cal State University in Venus Hills. He is a brilliant brother and a dear friend, and I'm a part of my
Good afternoon, family. Let's give Dr. Julianne Malveaux a round of applause. Julianne and I go back, way back, but she like to tell people she's young, and then she fell, and she said, now I need all the help I can get. Yo, she coming back, hold on. So we used to write columns side by side for 25 years. I wrote a weekly column. I think Julianne is still writing her column. And we'd be invited around the country to talk. And we used to try to tell people this is not going to be the kind of conversation that you really want to have. You know, we used to really kind of put it down on folk when everybody else was engaged in respectability politics and, you know, minding their elders and we shall overcome and all of those kinds of things. You know, we was telling folk this was coming. And we've been having this conversation a long time, huh, Tim? I see Joe. Joe, we've been having this conversation a long time. So whenever they try to put me and Julianne on the same panel, we try to give them a warning. You know, we're like, this ain't gonna be what you think it's gonna be. Because she and I are like Compton and Long Beach. Now you're gonna be in trouble. So, I'd like to thank the California Black Chamber. I think this is
African American.
African American. I prefer to call you American Africans.
There we go.
There we go. You know, because that's what we are, American Africans. We got that twisted around. And white people, I know some of y'all don't say white people. Y'all say white people. You know, y'all don't want nobody to know that we talk about white people behind closed doors too. But we don't say the same things that they say about us, okay? We try to figure out how we gonna work with them and they try to figure out how they won't work with us. And we think that our retrogression that Dr. Malveaux talked about, because we are going backwards, we are in a state of retrogression. And it's for a number of reasons. One, we are in a time warp where we still talk about the 60s and the 70s like it was yesterday, when it was actually 50 years ago. Now, if the folk in the 1960s have been talking the same talk in 1963 as those that were talking in 1903 with Du Bois, you know, those young folk wasn't trying to hear it. Okay, we've been told, you know, that if we disrupt the system, you know, the white folk would punish us and that would nothing get done. Well, disruption is a tactic, but status quo is a tactic too. And maintaining the status quo has always been the objective of the dominant society. I'm laying context here for this report I'm going to have you guys refer to momentarily. And so we have been told in the 1980s and in the 1990s and 2000, then Lord, we stumbled up on a black president in 2008, and they were trying to tell us, you have reached equality. Y'all got a black president, okay? And we don't need affirmative action. And then those that we thought who were people of color, who were our allies, were the advocates against affirmative action. And then you had a bunch of anti-intellectuals out there that tried, through false equivalency, to say that affirmative action was our form of reparations. Reparations, you not only have to make good on the damage, but you have to repair. Yeah, they let us into colleges in the 70s and 80s, but who did they repair? All of those that they denied, okay? And they're back at that now. And so, until we were able to demonstrate that we knew what we were talking about, because they seem to think that we have, you know, a permanent, you know, complex. You know, black people are just paranoid. You know, like what we see is real. Nobody else seems to believe till it happens to them. Everybody want to be black until the police show up. Then you be talking about, I'm Albanian, you know, you change your walk and all of that, okay? There's a different kind of conversation when it comes to black people. Dr. Malveaux made mention of it, but it's in this report. Part of what is driving our retrogression is anti-blackness. And it's not a biracial society anymore. It was biracial 50 years ago, but now it's multifocal. You know, everybody look at us and say, how come you can't help yourself? You know, James Brown said it 50 years ago. I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open the door and I get it myself. Okay? But they won't even open the door for black people. We have been talking about wealth inequality and income inequality and contract inequality for 50 years. You know, black businesses are getting less contracts today than they were getting in the 1980s, before Pete Wilson passed 209. Okay? And so we now practice this sort of escapism, where we just want to do well enough to escape poverty. We don't want to cause no trouble. You're not going to have no trouble out of old Eleanor Gordon. Okay? We done gave our advocacy up. All we want is to be able to go to our fine homes, make our decent wages. You know, remember back in the day? You know, I can talk to a few people in here who've been making money a long time. We thought 6 figures was the threshold. If I could just make 100,000, I'll be all right. Shoot, I know folk now that are making $200,000 and $300,000 and they still ain't all right. Okay? Because the new discriminator is price discrimination. Folk ain't leaving California because they want to. They're leaving California because they can't afford to live here. Los Angeles County is the 3rd largest county of black people anywhere. We're the largest county in the nation, but But in terms of black population, 900,000, okay, black people can't afford to live here no more. Okay. If you look at this report, I'll call out just a few statistics in this report. I was a co-author of this report, along with Dr. Donna Nickel and Dr. Scarza, D'Artagnan Scarza, and several other data houses. And we pulled this together. Yes. They told me to find a nice place to start because it's a bad spot to be in between black people and food. So, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to just give you this statistic. About where black people are in Los Angeles County. Okay, 60% of black people in Los Angeles County are rent burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on rent or mortgage. 60%. Okay, when you look at income, black people in Los Angeles make $20,000 less than white people. Okay? Well, they make $20,000 less than the median and $30,000 less than white people. Okay? So there's no way that you can be equal if you're being less. Now, how does that impact black business? It impacts black business because they're still playing the same games with respect to capital and contracts that they've been playing. Okay, I'm a true believer, and I get in the biggest fights with folk like John Bryan and them folk, and Pharisee Hogan Rose, and those folk who run these micro loan companies. They want to give us micro loans, $25,000, which is enough money to fail. And then 9 out of the 10 fail, but they want to point to the one person that made it. We helped just one business succeed. In the meantime, in that same 30 years, from 1992, since the advent of the microloan, you have seen a wealth consolidation. White folk give themselves mega loans that you don't even have to pay back. During COVID, when they was giving money away, black people was astonished. So they giving money away. They've been giving money away. Okay? They are not going to allow this economy to crash again. So if they got to give money away, we've been asking for money forever. They said we didn't have it. Okay? But next thing you know, they got money to give away. They got money to send, to fight wars. We ain't gonna talk about that, or we might talk about that depending on how Dr. Malveaux is feeling. But I want to set the table for you guys to understand why we're in this retrogression. Okay? Economic subjugation has been impacting black people for 100 years. You see in this report, we live 11 years less than our Asian counterparts and 7 years less than everybody else. And economic subjugation, simply put, is where they hire us last, fire us first, pay us less, charge us more, work us harder so we die sooner. I'm gonna stop on that point and then...
We're just gonna pause.
We still gonna talk, but we just want to let them serve.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them serve. So, okay, tell the servers they can serve, and I'll be back in a minute to bring this full circle.
So we're just taking a pause, and the dialogue will continue. First off, Lord have mercy. Let's give our two economists here.